Good evening and welcome to the Hawaii Theater Center. You are joining for Tuning Up with...
Wait, they're showing you first.
Oh,
Dave.
sorry.
There was a big close-up of you, Dave.
Okay, I'm not Iggy, but...
Should we start again?
You want to start again? Yes.
Here's Tuning Up, and I'm Iggy, and this is...
I'm Dave, and today is a great start. Today is a holiday. Bet you didn't know about this one. I learned it this morning from one of my wonderful colleagues, Steve. He shouted over the wall. He said, "Hey, you know what? You know who I saw in the news this morning? It's an international holiday. Today is International Ukulele Day. So in our advanced planning and all, as we do here, Iggy, can you introduce our guest?
How much advanced planning do we do?
We talked about this last week.
Yeah, we did actually. Because for a guest such as tonight's guest, you do have to plan ahead quite a bit. So we are so thrilled to welcome Jake Shimabukuro, ukulele extraordinaire.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is
pleasure.
An honor.
I was just telling Dave that actually, so Dave is an accomplished viola player, and the two of you have shared the stage already when I have yet to share the stage with Dave. You're very lucky, Jake.
I know. Thank you. That was that was at the Blue Note. We did a virtual benefit concert, and it was part of Joshua Nakazawa's project, who was a guest on this show 2 weeks ago now.
Just 2 weeks. See, we've actually been planning this for 2 weeks. Yes, that was a really fun opportunity. We did Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes.
Is the piece that I got to hop on for.
Never heard that piece before.
and now for our off the beaten path for Iggy this evening, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, it was actually an arrangement done by a friend of mine, Brian Shepard, out of Los Angeles, and and so it worked out perfectly. We already had parts for it, and and it's one of my favorites, and it was written by Freddie Mercury, who was the lead singer of a band, right? Yes. Queen, and it's always just been one of my all-time favorite classic rock tunes.
Really? Oh, What's your second favorite?
My second favorite, I don't usually think about what my second favorite is. It's usually always my favorite. But
are just favorites. Right?
Yeah, just favorites.
I have to tell you, and I don't think we've ever talked about this before. The first time I heard you play was at Spoleto Festival in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
I was there for the classical music festival.
Yeah.
And I remember, seeing the billboards of this, as at the time it was the ukulele concert, because I was from Chicago and I didn't know any better. And I came in with this, perception of palm trees and kind of this misguided idea of what I was going to hear that night. And I think it was My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Yes.
Hearing you play that on the ukulele blew my mind and was one of those kind of defining moments in my life where it was like, this is the potential when we think outside the bounds of what music can be and should be and all of those sorts of things. And it was outside in a park. Just have a very vivid memory of this, and I'm, can't believe I'm sitting next to you having this conversation. So.
No, that is a great festival, though. Yeah, I used to go there every other year, perform. It's a beautiful city, as you know, and that was, that arrangement. It's a song written by George Harrison, of course, and I've always felt like such a strong connection to George Harrison because he loved the ukulele.
Oh, really?
It was his favorite instrument, and he also lived in Hawaii part-time, right? He has a house on Maui, and so I just remember that all of his songs, to me anyway, the chord voicings, just the way the melody is laid out, works so perfectly on the ukulele. And if he were alive today, I would have loved to have asked him if he got a lot of his melodic ideas from playing the ukulele, because they work so well on that instrument.
Good. Yes, the harmonic changes work beautifully. What Dave said about his introduction to the ukulele and maybe his, judgment reminds me of something you said on a TED Talk show, and you said, the nice thing when you have a ukulele and you're about to perform anywhere in the world is that people have
low expectations. That's always, I say that all the time, but it's so true, right? But it's like, and I joke around about it, but to me, that's one of the I don't know, just one of the captivating things about the instrument or the charm of the instrument is you see this very simple, it's a 4-stringed instrument, but unlike the violin or the viola, because of the re-entrant tuning, which means that which means that it's not like your normal stringed instrument where your highest string is closest to the ground and then your lowest string is away from the ground. You start with an A, and then it drops to an E, and then C, like middle C on the piano. But then when you get to the 4th string, it goes up a perfect 5th to a high G. So your 2 high strings are on the outside, and your 2 low strings are in the middle. So it's really amazing because it's the only stringed instrument that I know of, well, of course, aside of the piano, but it's the only string instrument where you have that major second interval in the open tuning. And so because of that, you can, there's just so much that you can do with that, right?
So when you think of the ukulele, you think of gong, 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 or are you thinking gong, 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 gong?
No, I think, it's the way we would sing it as kids was to the phrase, my dog has fleas, right? It's the da-da-da-da. But over the years, like modern players, starting with people like Ota-san and things have also transitioned the tuning where they would make that high G string an octave lower. So now you have that low G. So it has a very different sound. The way that if you listen to Israel Kamaka Vivole's version of Over the Rainbow, right, which is a very, very famous rendition of him strumming the ukulele and singing that, the sound of that ukulele is tuned with a low G, and that's why it has that very deep resonance to it.
Actually, my wife does a version of that, very beautiful. She'll, turn red if I mention that, but I always enjoy
on the piano.
No, on the actual ukulele,
oh,
and then
wow.
she starts singing. It's always very beautiful. Dave, if people have questions, what do they do?
Well, they can text in to us this evening, right here at the bottom of our screen. This number right here, you can text. We'll see some of those questions as they're passed along to us, along with your name, and we can answer those on the air here. And I think we have a quiz question this evening as well.
I don't know if... Okay, so, we do. Let me introduce that quiz question.
Okay,
because
there's lead up.
What Dave likes to ask the guest is, he likes to ask the guest to take us from the beginning. Now, the beginning, for me, in terms of knowing you, is when I joined the then Honolulu Symphony. It was back in 97. And I don't know if you came to perform in 97 and 98 around that time, but I remember vividly it was with your group called Pure Heart, am I correct? And so that was kind of a revelation. Just the beautiful harmonies and just the beautiful partnership you had with your friends and the beautiful sounds, the percussion and the birds and the ukulele. But I guess let's get to the quiz question, I guess, first, because I was going to ask something that might take too much time. But about this concert is what our quiz question. So, Jake, do you remember what we talked about what that quiz question would be?
Yeah, what was the first song, right? With our group we got to perform with the Honolulu Symphony Orchestra.
I don't know if it was actually the first song, but it was definitely one.
Oh yeah, for that show, yeah.
Should we give extra credit, or should we accept any of the songs, or are we looking for a piece that was specifically for
First
Jake?
instrumental song then. How's that?
Okay,
It was
great.
the first instrumental song.
Great. Yes. Specific is good.
And we're talking about 1996.
I think it was 99.
99,
It was 1999, yeah. 98 or 99.
And our former Pops conductor, Matt.
Yeah, Matt Kattengoop, he did the arrangement for this. And I remember one of the things that was a little awkward for me for that first conversation was because I asked him, originally, the recording of that piece was in C sharp minor. And the reason for that is because our John Yamasato, who was our singer, for that recording we tuned all our instruments a half step down, so that it was easier for him to sing some of those songs. And well, he had to also sing the harmony for his songs. So for him to hit some of those notes, we tuned a half step down to kind of cheat a little bit, right? But a lot of, Jimi Hendrix used to do it, right? A lot of the, rock guitar players used to do it. So we did that. So when we did the arrangement for this song, Matt had arranged it. And then I told him, oh no, because I was going to need to retune my instrument a half step down. So he said, oh, well, what if I just, make all the parts a half step higher? It's like, you can do that? He goes, oh yeah, I just,
Click a button.
yeah, just with a click of a button. So I said, oh, okay, that's perfect. So,
That's
yeah.
great. So Dave, if they get the right answer,
Yes. Well, if they get the right answer and they live locally here on Oahu, we have a bottle of wine for you that we will deliver this week. It is an Obsidian Cabernet Sauvignon from our good friend Terry at Hasser Wines here in Chinatown. We have a lovely charcuterie board named after Terry that she has given us to enjoy here this evening. So the correct answer to the number on the bottom of your screen, and we look forward to seeing those. And I look forward to hearing what the answer is, because I have no idea.
But it's good because it actually ties in.
Good.
Well, we can get to that
all
later.
planned.
So-
but yeah.
I guess the question I had,
Oh, wait, shout out to Terry, because hi Terry, if
Hasser.
you're watching. Yeah, because her brother and I went to high school together. Kaimuki High School.
Kamuki High School, very good. I used to take some late night Korean classes there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for adults.
Yeah, that's
Like
right.
years
We
ago.
had the adult school there.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay. Oh, I'm nervous. I'm
no,
nervous.
no. So,
Yeah.
so this is not a serious class right now, but I did want to ask you, because actually the first time I actually heard someone playing the ukulele live was that concert. But maybe can you just tell us some of the people who inspired you to play the ukulele? Who was there before you
Yeah.
to bring this instrument to light?
Okay. Well, my biggest inspiration, for playing the ukulele was Ota-san. Ota-san, recorded, probably 100 records, but he learned from Eddie Kamai, right? Who's regarded as the first ukulele virtuoso, who paved the way for all of us. And but Ota-san, to me, was the most versatile. He was just so diverse. He was an incredible. Of course, he played. His arrangements of a lot of traditional Hawaiian songs were magical, but he was an exceptional jazz player. He could improvise over anything, and his chord voicings, his technique was just incredible. He could cross genres. He would do beautiful arrangements of classical music. He would take Japanese folk songs. He was one of the first guys that I know of that actually recorded with a full symphony orchestra. It was a song called "Song for Anna," and decades ago, Andre Pop, one of the famous composers, heard Ota-san play, and was just so mesmerized by his playing. And this is the story that was told to me by Ota-san's son, Herb Ota Jr., and was so mesmerized by his playing that he went up to Ota-san after the show and said, I'm going to write a piece for you, and I'm going to fly you up to Europe, and we're going to record it together. And Ota-san at the time was like, oh yeah, sure, we'll see. And I guess a few months later or a year later, he contacted Ota-san, said, I wrote this piece. I want you to fly up and let's record this. And they did this piece called Song for Anna, sold millions of copies worldwide. And to me, it's just one of the most gorgeous ukulele pieces ever written with full orchestra, and it's absolutely stunning to hear, to listen. I still have the vinyl, at home.
And is it something that you've had the opportunity to play with orchestra?
No, never. Yeah, actually, that's one song I never touched, because to me it's Ota-san's song. And the other thing with that song is, at the time Ota-san was playing with a low fourth string. So you can't actually play that song in the traditional tuning with the reentrant tuning. I mean you can, but it just wouldn't sound exactly the same, because you wouldn't have anything below middle C. Yeah. But it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. If you haven't heard it, you definitely have to hear it. Yeah.
Can I ask, we had a guest a couple weeks ago, Ron Artis II.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We did a little project with Ron where he played with the symphony, and we were talking about the experience of playing with a symphony. It's much different than playing a solo show or playing with your band, to say. What's that like? Can you describe that?
It's the scariest, most intimidating feeling.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. It's and I love Ron. Ron is so talented. I know Josh Nakazawa was talking about him when he was on, and Josh said he's listening. So Josh, if you're listening, but yeah, Ron is so incredibly talented. His voice, his songwriting, his guitar playing chops. I mean, he can play every instrument, but just so much music, right? Just comes out of him. But I will say that having the opportunity to play with a symphony orchestra is the greatest honor if you're not of the classical world. If you don't come from that world, because you're on stage with at least 50 or 60 plus musicians who have dedicated their entire lives to playing this instrument, and to have that many of them on stage together playing at the same time alongside of you is just, it's the greatest rush. I mean, people don't understand. I had the honor of playing with Maestro Iggy, on many occasions, and it was just the most. It was so fulfilling, for me, and just for those of you that are watching that maybe are not familiar with the caliber of classical musicians. I want to share this story. There was this one time we were going to play. There was this new piece that we were going to play, and I asked Iggy, because it was a piece that I think I wrote this guitar part for it. So I was going to play the guitar part, and there was an ukulele solo somewhere in the middle. And I remember telling you, Iggy, that, oh shucks, I wanted something to at least play part of that melody, right, that the ukulele was playing. So Iggy said, "Oh yeah, let me hear it, and I'll play, and I'll jot it down and notate it." So I was like, okay. So I play the recording for him on my laptop. I was like, okay, here it is. It's coming up. And I was like, okay, it's coming up right here. And Iggy, with his pen and paper, listened to it, and in real time, as it was playing, was just frantically like jotting down these notes. It was like a 16-bar solo.
The riff.
And then after that, it's, you know, I stopped it, and he was like, is that the end? I said, yeah. And then he put in all the measure lines, and he transcribed it in real time perfectly.
Well,
And it was like you know, again, it was just, it's just amazing to, you know, the time, the commitment, the dedication, the caliber, you know, musicianship that is required of the kind of music that you play every night. It's, I wish more people could understand that, you know?
I think a lot of people understand, but what Jake is not saying is that someone else, that a lot of people that, I mean, a lot of musicians that we played, they wouldn't need to write everything down on a piece of paper. They would just like do it right away on their instrument. No, but here's the thing. We've had, you know, amazing artists from the non-classical field, like yourself, you know, Amy Hanai Lee, Raitea Helms, and you all are so impressed by the symphony, the orchestra, and the musicians. But what you should know, you and Raitea and Amy should know, and that we are equally impressed by your craft. So it takes many hours of practice, you know, on the classical field. You know, we have to go through training, we start young, and you know, it takes a little of discipline and dedication. But you know, I'm sure some of you have read this book by Malcolm Gladwell. I forgot the title, but there's a chapter he talks about the Beatles and how they put in 10,000 hours of practice. And I'm sure that you've done at least 10,000 hours than you've done them really quickly early in your life. So I think we all have this thing in common, which is just the passion and the dedication. And I know, you know, yourself, the first time you were maybe playing with the symphony, you were a little bit maybe intimidated in a good way. I think you were kind of humble, very humble, just to see so much training that people like myself have had. But we trade all those things, classical music and solfege and theory and things like that. But what I'm very envious of is how you were able to learn so many different styles. Hawaiian music yourself, you know, you wrote some things that sounded very much like flamenco, jazz, blues, bluegrass. So I wanted to ask you, you know, early on, I'm sure, I think your mom taught you the first few things on the ukulele. How were you able to learn all the technique and the chords and playing single lines, melodic lines, but also like, did you have all kinds of music laying around at home? Because like you had Hawaiian music, you had jazz, and I mean, eventually you learn everything, right? So how did you find all those inspirations?
Yeah, well, my you know, well, thank you for saying that first of all, but
it's
still,
true. I wouldn't say it wasn't.
Yeah, I just loved all kinds of music growing up. You know, my mom and dad both had this incredible vinyl collection, and just all day, you know, I mean, everything from like you know, from the Woodstock Festival to Olivia Newton-John to Vicky Carr to Otasan, Peter Moon Band, right? I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And back then, they didn't sit down with me and tell me what style of music this was. You know, I just listened to all kinds of things, right? And I was just listening to whatever was played. And a funny story about, you know, like the Malcolm Gladwell book, you know, with the Beatles. So my dad had a Charlie Bird record, who was a, you know, gifted guitar player, played nylon string guitar, but did a lot of bossa nova and arrangements and things like that. But he had a record where he covered a bunch of pop songs, and on there were a whole bunch of Beatles songs. So when I was a kid listening to this record, it was one of my favorite albums, and I guess it's because he played nylon string guitar. So the nylon string guitar really spoke to me because of the nylon strings of the ukulele. So I love listening to him. But I thought those were all his songs. So I thought, man, Charlie Bird writes some of the greatest melodies of all time. You know, so I didn't even know that those songs like Yesterday and Michelle and all that. I didn't know those were written by the Beatles. I didn't even know those songs had lyrics because I was just hearing them as instrumentals. But I guess, you know, I grew up listening to a lot of different things, but then also I think what really I think inspired me was Bruce Lee. You know, BruceLee, I used to watch all of his movies. I used to watch his interviews and read some of his books. And I mean, there are so many things I can go into, but in a nutshell, you know, Bruce Lee embraced all the different styles of martial arts, right? Because he believed that every style of martial arts had something had something great about it and unique, right, to its tradition. So, I mean, he studied everything, and I mean, even like Muhammad Ali's like footwork, you know, like boxing. I mean, he just grappling everything. I mean, he was really the godfather of mixed martial arts. So when I remember reading that as a kid, I thought, for some reason, I just looked at music and all these different styles of music as different styles of martial arts, right? And then I realized that, you know, there's something unique and amazing about each one of them. So then I started listening and just kind of taking the things that spoke to me. So if I were listening to a bluegrass piece and maybe there's like a cool banjo roll or riff, I'd be like, oh, that's so cool. How can I incorporate that into the ukulele? Or if I hear like a little riff on the harpsichord, you know, like some kind of harmonic minor run, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. It catches my ear. You know, I love that, you know, that sound, and I would figure out how to do it on the ukulele. So it was just all these different things. You know, you mentioned blues and just kind of hearing those all those signature sounds and characteristics, right, about each genre.
Yeah, so you embraced everything. Dave, I actually never asked you that question when you grew up. What did your parents listen to, and what did your range of genres?
It was mostly classical music, if I remember correctly.
Are they professors?
No, they're not. They're not musicians. My mom's in the church choir. You know, that sort of thing. No, it was always, you know, WFMT was always on in the car, and it was a very rare occurrence that classical music was not playing when we were driving someplace. At least that's what I remember. But I'm curious, with the mixed martial arts, perhaps the most deadly, who were the composers that you were drawn to, or are you drawn to now? Are there people who stand out?
Yeah, you know, it's hard. It's hard when you talk about composers because it's like you know, because there are certain like certain musicians or artists, I should say, that will interpret a combination of notes, right, in a way that I got to imagine even for the composer.
Yeah,
it's like I could never imagine it sounding like that, right? I mean, like if you take like out of the, you know, if you go outside of classical music world, if you take a song like Whitney Houston singing "I Will Always Love You," right? Dolly Parton herself admitted that I never imagined that song sounding like that or becoming what it has become, right? Because it was another artist who took that melody, who took, you know, this piece and interpreted it in a way that just spoke to so many people in an incredible way. So. Yeah, so I mean, for me, there's always been certain musicians that when I hear them play, it's just everything that they do to me just like really gets under my skin, you know. And I just I don't know, like if I had to just name a few off the top of my head, you know, like when I hear someone like Edgar Meyer play,
yeah,
just I remember one of the first recordings I bought of Edgar Meyer. You know, I listened to what was the name of the record?
Appalachian? No, that's
No. It was a gosh, what was it called? It wasn't his bluegrass. But anyways, I turned it on. I'm listening to it. I'm just like, oh. And I didn't read the inside yet, so I just wanted to listen. And I'm listening to it. I'm like, oh man, he's got a whole ensemble with him. You know, so I thought he had like a little chamber, orchestra or something. But then later, I found out that was him playing all those parts, right? So to imagine him playing up in that high register on his double bass, it just like blows me away, right? But anyways, you know, it's people, it's musicians like that, or like when I think of like the day, like Paganini, right? You know, I mean, you think of Paganini and he was so virtuosic, but also because he was writing these pieces, but he was performing them in a way that just excited people and just would like just electrify, right, the room. So I think that's what made it so powerful. So I think, you know, it's that combination of the piece and the right person to interpret those,
I think
those notes.
You're making a very good point. Because actually, I like to do tango, and in tango, it's very, very important whose style you're doing, because you had a piece by a composer, Stamponi, but then you have different tango orchestras, and they would do a piece very different from other orchestras. So you have the Pugliese style, Lorenzi style, and so the performer takes a whole different new dimension. You mentioned something about maybe you hear a chord on the harpsichord, which reminds me, I haven't checked with her, but you actually did take piano lesson with Ethel Iwasaki, is that correct?
Yeah.
So, hi Ethel.
Oh, is she watching?
Most likely.
Oh, Ethel, hi. Yeah, you know, she was a huge, you know, she's an incredible teacher, of course, right? But she was so influential. And I got to tell her this once, you know, I told her, you know, Ethel, thank you so much for those lessons. And, you know, you were just so influential in the way I approach music. And she looked at me, she goes, you know, what are you talking about, right? But she never knew this all these years. And I'll never forget this, because this was such an epiphany for me. I was having a lesson with Ethel, and we're sitting there. I can't even remember what piece we're working on, but then we started talking about rock and roll music, and she goes, I don't like rock and roll music. So I said, oh really? So I said, oh, and I said, why is that? And she told me, because there's no dynamics in rock and roll music. It's just one volume from beginning to end. It's just, you know, and I remember walking out of that lesson, just like, I was just thinking about what she said, and I realized like that dynamics is so important in any art form. And then because it also made me realize that it's not just dynamics in volume, right? But dynamics can be applied to, I mean, harmonic dynamics, melodic dynamics, you know, whether it's going from one person playing to 100 people playing at once. I mean, there's so many aspects and ways that you can apply dynamics, right, to any art form. So when I walked out of that lesson, a million things were going through my mind, and I realized, oh my goodness, she's so right. And I remember going home that day, I took out my ukulele, and I started trying to play the songs that I was playing already, but I started playing those songs and trying to add all this shape to it, you know? So whether it's, you know, of course the basic, right, going from pianissimo to, you know, just loud to soft to loud, and really working in those dynamics, but also going from playing a single line thing to a chord melody, right? So now I have this one line playing, but then now I got 4 voices at once, and I realized like that's an incredible dynamic that I can use for the ukulele, right? Because I can play from really soft, just single notes, and then I can go to full chords and play, right? You know, tone color, going from using all of my just all nail to all flesh on my finger, you know, and I can get these really wispy sounds, like if I just use the side of my thumb on the strings and do this almost like a, you know, like using it like a bowl, right, in a way. And I started really exaggerating this, and I thought that, you know, that's in life in general, that's what inspires us and excites us. It's dynamics.
Colors, right?
Right? Yeah, and it's because when things stay like this for too long of a time and it just becomes normal, it's like every once in a while we need this or we need this, right? To like, ooh, oh, whoa, that was cool, you know? So so yeah, Ethel, thank you so much, because that completely changed my whole perspective, you know, in music.
Dave, do we have a winner yet?
I don't believe we do.
Oh, I'm
no
surprised.
winner yet. We've had some good questions, though, if I may. Jake, if you were to study another instrument, what would it be? From Mari.
Oh.
Well, you've got the ukulele and you've got some piano already.
Oh gosh,
let me ask you: do you play a guitar? Because I've seen you actually.
I mean, I know a few chords on the guitar. If I work it out, I can learn it. But I'm not a guitar player. Yeah.
Well, I've seen you perform on the guitar.
I can play that one song. Yeah, I guess maybe the bass, you know, because that's, to me, it's the other half of my instrument. You know, it's the sound that I don't have. But and that's why I love playing with bass players or even cellists, right? Like,
you mean you're talking about the bass or the bass guitar, or the bass line?
You know, either one.
Okay.
Yeah, either one, because I think that low register really helps to complete, right, the ukulele. And I kind of have this theory, because with the ukulele in the reentrant tuning, having the middle C as your lowest note, I feel like everything from middle C and above, your brain doesn't really categorize that as bass functioning tones. So on the ukulele, it's so much easier to play, because you don't have to worry so much about bass resolution, right? And like, you know, what's happening in the lower register, so you can play so freely. And I think there's a lot of this kind of you know, I mean, everything can be so vague on the ukulele, right? Like, I could play the open strings on the ukulele, right? From low to high would be C, E, G, A, right? I could think of that as a basic C6 chord, right? Or, you know, but I could also look at that as like a F major 9 chord, depending on what the low register is playing, right? It could be a D minor 11 chord. I mean, there's so many different extensions. I mean, it could be a B flat, you know, with a sharp 11, right? So, I mean, you know, there's just so many ways that you can just look at those 4 tones. And that's another thing I love about the ukulele, that sometimes when you bring in the low notes or the lower tones, it defines it too much, and then I think there's less room for interpretation, right?
You know, speaking of brain capacity, a few years back, you know, touring all the time and you know, playing your albums, all the songs, but you had to dedicate a huge chunk of your time to perform and create Byron Yasui's Concerto for Ukulele that we premiered with the Hawaii Symphony. And it's, I think I'm not wrong in saying that it's kind of a genre that you weren't quite performing before that. So you sort of have to shift gears, and not just like 3 weeks before, but from the time that Byron maybe created the concerto, and what I remember vividly is it was a massive piece, and so we premiered that piece, and the crowd was so appreciative, and I could feel all the emotional and physical energy that you had to put into that work, that when we finished performing that concerto, you just, you burst into tears, because I think this whole emotional release of all this effort and energy that you put into that creation, and then that you did it, and we did it, the symphony, and Joanne Falletta conducted it, and just like a catharsis. It felt like. Tell us about your experience.
That was just by, as far as anything that I felt like I've ever accomplished, in my life outside of family and things like that. I mean, that was truly what I feel is my greatest accomplishment, and what I feel most proud of, that I've ever done, hands down, musically. Dr. Yasui's piece was very atonal, and that the things that were coming, the sounds that was coming out of my the sounds that were coming out of my ukulele were so foreign to me, because I had never played those combinations before. So hearing this, it felt like I was hearing the ukulele for the first time again, because I was playing things that I had never ever played before, and I gotta send a big, I have to acknowledge the Masaki School of Music,
right.
Because Nancy basically
Nancy Masaki?
Yeah, Nancy Masaki basically allowed one of her top instructors, Brett Nita, to work with me for 3 months to serve as my music coach, for this project.
So Brent was playing the orchestra line.
Yeah.
On the piano.
And we met Monday through Friday, every day from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We met over at the studio and worked on the piece. And then, I mean, not straight through, because, I would leave for a tour and then come back, and then we'd work again. And he was so patient with me, and he's just, he's an amazing musician. I mean, really, really incredible. But he spent so many hours with me, and including Dr. Yasui. On the weekends, Dr. Yasui would come over to my house and work with me and tell me, like, you guys were talking about this a couple weeks ago, how that is an extraordinary opportunity to have the composer sit with you and explain to you, like, what they were thinking on this during this part, or how they want it to be executed. What's the proper phrasing. Mm-hmm. He could even show me. I could even play things for him, and he could tell me which way he liked it better. Mm-hmm. In this fingering, or there were certain things where I said, well, if like a note were sustaining, rather than just plucking it and let it sustain, like if I did a tremolo, and so we could work out things like that, and he, and I felt like I could really perform the piece that the way that he wanted, I mean, that, and I mean, I don't know if I did, but it at least gave me a good idea, and I didn't have to guess, because I could actually ask him right there. But it was the greatest experience, being up on the stage, just a tremendous honor. And I don't know if I ever got to tell this to you, Iggy, but that night, especially the first night, I was so nervous. I mean, my hands were just shaking. I was so nervous, and I remember there was a passage, I think in the second movement. Toward the end, where there was a little break for me there, and I had to come back in, and I remember getting lost, and I looked at Iggy, Iggy knew. I mean, as soon as he looked at me, he knew I kind of got a little lost. And he looked at me and he cued me in when to come back in. And I'll just never forget that because, as concertmaster, it's part of his job is to understand everybody's part, right? I mean, he doesn't have my music in front of him, but he knew exactly where I was supposed to come back in. And that, I remember in that moment being so grateful, but then also once again, like, just realizing like, wow, just what an honor it is for me to be up here, playing this piece that I spent 3 months just drilling myself, working in it hours and hours and hours every single day, and then playing it with this orchestra who got the music like 4 days ago. And then, we're premiering it together. But it's my greatest memory, and what I'm most proud of, in my entire musical
Well, it just
career.
shows how many or how wide your palette is. You're able to do so many different styles and so many touch so many different people. I remember that actually there was a sort of a rehearsal with Brand, the pianist at the Masaki School of Music, and Joanne Falletta was there. And,
that's right.
And by the way, I don't remember exactly what you were talking about when you got lost, but all my colleagues are very keen. So it was just me. Sometimes I take the credit because sometimes Claire, my step partner, tells me this is where we are, and then so I just relay the message. Dave, do we have a winner yet?
I don't think we do, but I want to ask a question that actually, before I ask the question, can you remind our audience what the exact specific question was for the quiz question?
So it was 1999. Jake Shimabukuro performed with the Honolulu Symphony when he was part of your group called Pure Heart. And there were a few selections that they did. But there was one specific instrumental number, so there was no singing. And that really featured the ukulele as a solo instrument. And if you don't know the title, maybe it was so
We're going to take these excerpts of Iggy singing each week and combine them into a full-length
so
feature
very
film.
much inspired in the style of a famous B composer.
We have a winner.
Wait, did you just hum it in C sharp minor or was that in D minor?
I don't remember.
Our winner is Helen this evening.
Oh,
Does Helen have a last name?
thank you, Helen.
Oh, Helen Wong.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. As in,
Is that
Randy.
Randy's? Randy's Helen?
No.
Huh?
No, because who we're thinking about has kept her maiden name. So it could be. Who knows?
who knows? Well, I hope someone does, because otherwise we'll have to drink this bottle of wine.
And what is that bottle of wine again, Dave?
It is Obsidian, a Cabernet Sauvignon from our friends at Hasser Wine. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Helen.
Jake,
Thank you.
I did want to ask you, so we talked a lot about on-stage things, your performance. One story I remember, we were having dinner and there were a lot of people and a lot of very important people on your team and some fans or maybe a fan club. And you were there very humble, and I think it was a Japanese place, and maybe they served shabu-shabu or they had noodles and soup, and what you were doing, you were taking everyone's bowl and you were serving the soup and the noodles and serving each guest. And I was just, Chris was with me, and we were both wondering, maybe, you have the limelight and everything, and then maybe there's some points where there's a point maybe you just need to be yourself, and sometimes when you talk to fans or producers, whoever, it's sometimes hard to be yourself because maybe you have to watch what you say, maybe you're in the public eye, maybe they're recording every word you say, but just the simple ceremonial fact of serving simple food to guests allowed you to just be yourself and be able to breathe and be authentic, maybe. So maybe I'm making a huge fuss of something you probably don't even remember. But I guess my question is like when you're off stage and you just want to be yourself and not have you have your image, and you actually are the image. It's not like sometimes we have artists, they're on stage and like, "Wah!" and then after stage at home they're just super quiet. That's not new. You're kind of the same all the time. But I was just wondering about something so simple where you can just take a little breath. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something really special about, and I love this about. I don't think it's unique to Japanese culture, but like in Japan, right after a big event, they always have something called the uchiage. It's called an uchiage, and basically what you do is after it's done, everyone will go to a restaurant and you basically celebrate everyone's hard work, right? You celebrate everyone's contribution to the success of the night. And I just love that because, you don't always have that opportunity. And sometimes in business or in certain industries, it can just feel like it's just never ending, right? It's like, okay, we did this, now we're on to the next thing. Oh yeah, now we're on to the next thing. And I think sometimes you lose those moments or those opportunities to show your appreciation, or to give people the satisfaction and the recognition of the work that they did. And that's why I've always loved that. So there's two things. There's the uchiage, which is like the dinner and everyone's ordering drinks and just like, oh, okay, it's all done and we're just celebrating together. People give speeches or they say things, and but then at the end there's something called an ipponjime, and it's a quick thing where everyone puts their hands like this and they clap together after they say yo, and it's like a yo, and they all clap together. And that unified clap, what it does is it unites everyone. It's in that split second, it reminds everyone how appreciated they are, and okay, we're putting a close to this. We all did a great job. Now let's move forward, right? And I love that because it gives the feeling of an end to a chapter. And that feeling to me is so important because when you feel that there's an end, you feel like, okay, now let's focus on the next thing. Otherwise, the end is different for everyone, right? In the group, right? So like as musicians, we show up to a performance. For us, the beginning is when we get there, we sound check and we play. When we're done, we leave. That's the end. The production crew got there 5 hours before. They're setting up, right? And then and they're the last ones to leave. So their end is something completely different, right? So it's a nice way. And in Japan, when we have those uchiages, the production crew, even though they're wrapping up and they probably come like an hour or two later, we wait for them. So we all end together, and I love that concept, that idea, and just unifying everyone, again, because I think it helps for the longevity of the crew and just the unification.
And I love that also before the show, and I noticed some of my colleagues who also in the tango world, we all gather before the show, and if you're religious, you say a prayer, or if not, it's just a moment to collect yourself, and so you can prepare and expand all your energy on stage. And you had that moment, maybe with the symphony, sometimes we don't have as much time, and there are like maybe 85 musicians, so it's a little harder to cheer together. But it's beautiful moments too as well.
I want to ask a couple of these other questions that we're getting because I'm very curious about them as well. You talked about the process of learning that concerto. Are you someone with perfect pitch? Can you hear something and then hear a popular song and then sit down on your instrument and kind of select notes and kind of put that together on the fly like Iggy does with his pen and paper?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I do not have perfect pitch. I can, if I hear a simple melodic phrase, then I'll probably be able to pick up my ukulele and find the notes. If it's a really complicated, melodic phrase, a lot of times it takes me a while. I'll sit there and listen to it over and over and really try to hone in, on each. On everything, and it's and for me too, hearing complex harmonies sometimes, like voices that get buried, somewhere in the arrangement, for some people they can hear it so quickly, right? Especially people that are used to playing the harmony right to the main lines. I've always been my majority of my life, I've always focused on the main line, right? But in the last, 10, 15 years, I've kind of tried to make it a point to focus on the second voice or the third voice, just to kind of get my ear trained, to
listening to that viola.
Yeah,
line. Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean, it's a real skill. It's something that you have to spend a lot of time doing, and it's not one of those things like, it's like if you haven't done it in a while, it's like getting on, not for me anyway. I mean, you have to constantly do it. It's the same thing with reading music. I'm a horrible sight reader. I'm a horrible sight reader. If you throw a piece of music in front of me right now, I'm like, okay, wait, give me some time. Okay, let me, But it's something you just have to do all the time, to keep up with it. So, yeah, I definitely don't have the ear training, to do, anything with I wish I could do it what Iggy does,
We've already
or
talked
what
about
you
this
do,
at the beginning of the show, sorry.
But it's it's really and you have to put the time and effort to it. It's a commitment, it's something you got to do daily, and so I'm definitely, I know that now being a dad and having two children, it's been harder to put in the same amount of time that I used to into practice and playing, but on the other side is I feel like the depth of expression has grown tremendously. I feel like I have more things to express or different things to say, or how I want to say them, or how to feel them come out of my instrument, And so that's been a real beautiful thing that I've grown to love.
Before I ask another question, could you share the correct answer to the quiz?
Oh yeah, we never. Only Helen knows.
Yes.
Only Helen knows that. So it's a piece called Toccata, and it was basically a variation on Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Yeah.
And it was very impressive. So much velocity.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, it's but I never. But we didn't play the intro and all that, right? It was just the I guess what I called the main line, the da 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 da, right? But yeah, that was what inspired me to do that on the ukulele was many years ago. I mean, I've always been familiar with the piece, right? Because you hear it in movies, and And it's such an iconic sound. You hear it like in those Dracula movies. It's like right, da 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 da, right? But and this was another turning point in the way I listen to music and approach music, was because I've always had an appreciation, right, for all different genres of music. But I remember, gosh, was it the 90s? Was it early 90s or late 80s? But there was a young musician by the name of Vanessa Mae, who came out, and she was kind of regarded as like a crossover, right, classical musician into kind of pop or early, EDM, electronic dance music kind of thing. And that was one of the pieces that she played. And I remember seeing her with her electric violin, and there was an electric guitar player and a drummer, and it was like a rock concert. And so I remember seeing that, and I was thinking like, wow, that's kind of neat that she had this vision to kind of bring in these different elements that you don't necessarily hear in classical music, right? And that's when I think that's for me with the ukulele. I started experimenting with electric bass players and drummers, and things like that, and kind of made me realize that let's try to branch out with different things and experiment. And it was a great learning experience, and so. Yeah, people like Noel Okimoto, who was always one of my heroes. When I was in high school, I played drums in the marching band, and I also played drums in the jazz ensemble. I was the worst jazz drummer, but Noel Okimoto was always one of my heroes, right? And then so fast forward, like a decade later, and actually being able to share the stage with him and play with him. We've done things together with Noel too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So speaking of vision and the next decade, a question that I like to ask and to put people on the spot: what does the future look like for the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, for symphonic music, especially here in Hawaii?
Man, I don't think I know enough of like the just the behind the scenes of what's happening with everything, but I would love to see it just thrive. I would love to be able to come out and see you guys play every weekend. I would love more opportunities to see you, not just in halls, but in other places all over Hawaii. I would love to see the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra tour and play in Japan and represent us in other countries. I would love to have I don't know, just maybe more opportunities for there to be like chamber ensembles, to go out and play more. Would love to see more collaboration with HYS too.
Absolutely. I was hoping you were going to get to that. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think there's this. I know
And
you've always been.
You're on the board of the Hawaii Youth
Yeah,
Symphony.
I feel very, very fortunate.
And
Randy
I know
Wong.
yes,
they've
you've
been-
opened many outlets and schools and new dialogues for the youth orchestra. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we leave, you have your latest CD called Trio. Is that your latest CD that is available?
Yeah, it's the latest, but it was released in 2019, so it's kind of like it's been a while. But I think that's, especially during this time. I'm not traveling, and I used to travel quite a lot, right, for the last 20 plus years now. So, but spending time at home, it's interesting because, you have to be creative and you find other ways of doing things like what you guys are doing. And I found that this has been, there's been a lot of opportunity right now for collaborative projects, which is great. Even like, and not just with other musicians, but other industries. to collaborate and support each other. And I've been seeing a lot of that, and I think it's inspiring, and I hope those collaborations and those that creativity and that support, for each other's industry continues, even long after this this virus.
Well, Jake, Dave, and Greg, it's a good time to collaborate.
Yeah.
And the funny thing I find is that you had a tune that was before the pandemic that is called "When the Mask Come Down," and that was written before the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote that song in, I want to say, like the end of 2018, or the beginning of 2019. And at the time, we were talking about it, and it didn't, we were like, yeah, it doesn't, I don't know why we even called the song that, but it's the opening track on the record, and we just thought, it'd be kind of cool. And I remember thinking that it was, the idea was when the masks come down, the thought for me was like when you're in an airplane and there's turbulence or there's something, and the oxygen masks from the top, right, come down. And for me, it was kind of like when you're when you're going through something, like a difficult time, maybe a lot of obstacles in your way, or in your life, then there's always that support. Remember to breathe. Remember to, that was kind of my thinking with it. And then it was, I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, I was talking about it with my bandmates, Nolan and Dave, who recorded that with me. We wrote it together, and we just thought, like, oh my goodness, we never would have thought. There's been a lot of song titles on that record that at the time, it just felt like, okay, it was there, but it didn't really make sense. We have a song on there called Resistance. We have a song on there called Strong in the Broken Places, like things like that. It was an Ernest Hemingway quote. But it's just but anyways, to make a long story short, I think this is a great time to not just collaborate, but also, support the organizations that are meaningful to you, and in any way that you can. I know we all can't give, some are more fortunate than others, but we have to show, like places like the Hawaii Theater, how much we support them and how much we want them to still be here, right, when this is all done, and they're being very creative, right, with the way that they're doing things, and continuing to support local musicians, and that's always been a long time collaboration and partnership that I've always felt, venues and artists, right, that how we can't serve, we need each other, because right, we need a place that allows us to, it's like watching the Super Bowl on a 85 inch TV. It's such a different experience, versus just seeing it in a small little I don't know, just in my bedroom. It's like completely different. And as every musician knows, the venue and the characteristics of the hall and the room is part of the instrument. It's part of the song. It's part of the music. It becomes the expression. It influences how and when you play the next note, right? So, we have to continue to support, yeah.
Well spoken.
Very well spoken, and you saved me from doing my normal pitch at the end of the show about how important it is to sustain not only the Hawaii Theater Center here, but the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra and the Hawaii Youth Symphony and all of these organizations that employ musicians and create work for this community and stimulate this economy as we get back to normal in the coming months here, hopefully. But the other thing that impacts performances are people on the other side, and we appreciate you on the other side of the camera here this evening joining us for this. We appreciate this opportunity to create community with you and enjoy taking your questions and engaging in conversation together. And I just want to thank you, Jake, for taking the time out of your schedule to come over here and hang out with us at the theater and talk about the past and the future and definitely the present. I think the most questions we got were regarding when you'd next be performing with the HSO. So might have to give them an answer sometime soon here. So Iggy, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you, Jake.
Thank you. Always such an honor. Thank you.
And thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday with another special guest. I'm not sure what international holiday it is next Tuesday. We'll have to check that out. But thanks for celebrating with us today, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again for your support.
Aloha.
Life changed so fast.
During COVID, we've had a chance to think about what's really important in our lives.
The arts are an expression of what it's like to be human.
To feel, to help us make sense of our world. Does it mean anything if no one sees it?
Training and dedication are stronger than any virus.
We all need to express ourselves.
Keep doing the things that make you happy.
So when the lights come back up,
We'll all be ready.
For the last 24 years, your nonprofit Historic Hawaii Theater has helped millions of people explore and experience the wonder of music, theater, and culture. From school plays to Broadway shows, from the Brothers Kaz to the Beach Boys, we've transported you from Hawaii to the moon and back. Won't you become a member today and help preserve this last remaining historic show palace? Go to hawaiitheater.com. Become a member today. We can't do it without your support. Mahalo.